Chapter 2. Man goeth forth unto his work. Psalm 148. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. And Katy slept, and she dreamed. Early in the months of 1935, in the throes of the Great Depression, the idea of moving to the Foxtan Webb place had been sparked by a few words. Mr. McMahan, occupier of the Foxtan Webb place, made a proposition to the struggling, aggressive young husband and father who made his home on the Gene Kuntz place. "Allen," he said, "help me take care of this herd of cattle I have on my hands, and I believe that we'll both make a good living." Mr. McMahan, an established cattle-raising Johnson Countyan, knew Allen. He knew the Schierbaums well. He'd also known all of the Webbs. He could see the promise of a money-making outfit if he had the right kind of person in business with him, and he saw that kind of partner in Allen. To Allen, Mr. McMahan's offer was like a window opening up and showing a bright future, a glimpse of hopes in doing better for Katy and the children. After weighing the matter, Allen was convinced the cattle project would pay off with hard work. And Allen was a hard worker. He believed he could do it all. Allen figured he could earn a few dollars working for his father, who was a paid road commissioner, and he'd also handle the cattle business with Mr. McMahan. In time, he figured, he could build up a good-sized herd of his own cattle. Yes, he and Katy'd have cattle of their own, right there on the Foxtan Webb place. An opportunity such as this was a first for Allen. He'd been able to attend only the first 2 years at the Webb School. Needless to say, the lack of schooling would limit and did limit his ability to read and write. However, Allen could figure numbers in his head faster than many could figure with pencil and paper. To fill in the gaps in areas in which he was lacking, the Lord blessed Allen with a helpmate who would be his teacher, accountant, reader, correspondent, encourager, and spiritual mentor. That was Katy. Allen valued Katy's capabilities. He willingly provided his strong back and trusted her ability to help him manage so they could live with what he could bring into the home. Jokingly, but with seriousness, he'd say, "Why, a wasteful woman with a teaspoon can throw more out the back door than a man can shovel in through the front door with a scoop shovel." Never dying were Allen's high hopes of providing Katy with a tolerable good living. He wanted to see Katy happy, and he had hopes of seeing his 3 children spend time in school. He longed to make a way possible for them to go through all of the grades at the Webb School and get a good education. That would please Katy. Yes, Mr. McMahan's words were like a catalyst. Allen knew he could handle cattle. He was knowledgeable in dealing with livestock. He'd been raised on a farm ever since the day he was born. He'd helped deliver calves in times when they would have died during birth. He had successfully doctored cows and calves and bulls. Yes, Allen knew how to keep a herd in prime condition. He recalled stories of how Grandpa Foxtan Webb managed his herds there on the Foxtan Webb place, and how he'd accumulated several acres of ground. He had heard that Foxtan would drive his cattle droves to the market. Allen was anxious to try his hand in the cattle business, something he believed in and understood. However, this cattle-raising venture wouldn't come without a price. Allen and Katy would have to leave their home on the Gene Kuntz place and live in a house surrounded by grazing acreage. That house and its land were just a short distance to the north in Christmas Tree Country. For Katy, the move was a big step. She mulled it over in her mind. She really liked their little house on the Gene Coons place. It was warm and comfortable. It was a new home. It was their first house. Kenneth Ray and Benny and Geraldine had been born there. How would the move affect them? And what about that beaten-down path she had between the Gene Coons place and her folks on the Brooks place? But then, after a good bit of hearing about Alan's wishes, Katy told herself to be reasonable about the whole thing. She knew why Alan wanted to make the move. She also was certain there wasn't a lazy bone in Alan's whole body. And if hard work could guarantee a better life, then she decided she wouldn't balk like a stubborn mule. Katy bolstered her confidence by saying, "The Lord helps those who help themselves." And she knew Alan was willing to help himself. She was willing to help herself. Alan was her determined, hard-working husband. She was his faithful, hard-working helpmate. After considering all things, Katy became more enthused and made plans to move to the north in Christmas Tree Country. Her final decision was to be strong. She'd tell herself, "My life can't be lived by doing what I'd like to do, but by doing what I have to do for Alan and these children." That's what she'd done during the 7 years they lived on the Gene Coons place. And there Katy'd seen the hand of the Lord at work in her chicken and egg business. She'd been an entrepreneur in Christmas Tree Country. First, Alan had built for her a good hen house, Katy's hen house. Katy gave the Lord the praise. In that hen house, Katy'd put 8, 15, or as many as 18 eggs in several nests. Her setting hens had their work cut out for them. They nested. They kept those eggs warm. Inside those eggs, baby chicks grew. 21 days later, baby chicks pecked free. 10 to 20 of those chicks lived, if all went well. Those chicks grew to be hens. Katy gave the Lord the praise. Yes. And in time, more chicks grew to be hens. Twice daily, Katy gathered the hens' eggs. She washed and dried them. The eggs were sold by the dozen, 8 cents per dozen, sold right there at the tunnel. The Lord got the praise. Yes. Katy saved 8 cents, 16 cents, 24 cents, 32 cents. She saved more. She counted the egg money, and a brand new Eldridge Treadle sewing machine, purchased from G.B. Vaughn, well, it found a home on the Gene Coons place. The Lord got the praise. Yes. Being one who'd been given hope by the one who gives hope, Katy believed in what the Bible said in Psalm 23. She knew the ups and downs of life. Katy looked to him as her source of strength in the valleys, the hills, and among the Christmas trees in Christmas Tree Country. She believed the Lord would lead her. He encouraged Katy. She encouraged Alan. They together believed God had put the chickens and all of the animals on earth for man's benefit. They'd seen Katy's chicken business grow from nothing because of hard work. We can do the same with that cattle business, they were thinking. And to Alan, Katy read Genesis 8:1, which said, "And God remembered Noah and all the cattle that was with him in the ark." So the two of them could prove by the Bible that a cow and a bull were kept alive during the flood. Alan and Katy figured that cattle roamed the hills of Christmas Tree Country because of God's plan for Noah. Noah was told to save the cattle from drowning. That was proof that animals were important in God's eyes. The earth, Noah's family, and all animals began all over again after the flood. Perhaps their world would begin all over again with their move to the Foxtan Webb place. Katie read from the Bible while Alan listened about Noah, an honest man who worked for 120 years building a huge boat, the Ark. He constructed it according to God's specifications. He followed God's plan exactly. He measured each prescribed piece. He put each piece in its designated place. And God told Noah to preach to the people. Did they listen? No, they didn't want to hear what Noah had to say. They didn't care to hear that God wanted to save them from the sorrows that would come because of disobedience. They were quite satisfied. But Noah listened when God told him to continue to preach and to build. Noah was obedient. The people of the world scoffed and laughed, but Noah trusted God. The words of ridicule were non-stop, and the people really made fun of him when he started talking about a great flood, a flood because of rain. The world had never seen rain. Rain, they mocked. Noah kept on talking about rain, though, and when God told him to quit building, he quit. And the people made even more fun of him when he started rounding up all of those animals. Noah, with God's help, corralled them, a male and female of each kind, and led them into the ark. And when Noah told his wife and his 3 sons and their wives to get on board with all of those animals, the people really did think the boat builder was out of his mind. Their ballyhoos were loud. But soon God spoke to the skies and told the rain to start. The rain covered the earth. Yes, Alan wanted to learn more about this man Noah. He believed Noah was a hard worker. He believed Noah listened to God. He believed God shut the door to the ark. God respected Noah. Unlike Noah, Alan had no one who mocked and scoffed as he was sawing down cedar trees for fence posts, counting heads of cattle, and rounding up his few hogs and chickens and his family of 4 there on the Gene Kuntz place. Alan, like Katie, remembered the old saying about the Lord helping those who help themselves. Yes, Alan believed God helped Noah, and he believed that God would help him. Katie wished she knew more about Noah's wife. Katie never found that woman's name in the Bible, but she believed that wife went on the ark with her husband and their 3 sons and their 3 wives, and 1 male and 1 female of each one of God's creatures. The 25-year-old homemaker had a great amount of respect for Noah's wife, and Katie knew that God had given her to Alan. God had given them 3 children. God had given Alan 2 hands and a strong back, and God had given Alan the desire to go to a different house on several acres of land. This head knowledge challenged Katie to step up with Alan, like the wife who belonged to the Bible man Noah. According to the Bible, in the time period of 2466 BC, 480-year-old Noah stepped out with a purpose. He finished that ark in 120 years. Noah's story was done. According to Johnson County folks, in the fall of 1935 AD, 31-year-old Alan jumped off into the old business of raising cattle. Alan's story was undone. Being a person of hope, Katy believed in hard work. She didn't back away from it. She knew the ups and downs of living in Christmas tree country. Life was not a bed of roses for her, and she didn't ever expect it would be just that. Katy looked to the Lord for her peace among the thorns and thistles and Christmas trees in Johnson County. But there on the grazing acreage with the big house, one thing was missing: a hen house. A hen house and a fenced-in chicken yard. Where would her displaced, Gene Kuntz-placed hens lay their eggs? And what about Geraldine's Mattie's? And where would her hens roost? And where would her roosters find just the right fence posts on which to crow? And this was Katy's reasoning. Every woman in Johnson County who's of any account, trying to raise her children and taking care of a home, well, that woman needs a good hen house and a way to raise chickens. Now, with Allen doing the figuring, pieces fell into place. Rolls of woven wire, boards, tin, nails, fence posts, chicken troughs. Well, soon those hens and Geraldine's Mattie's had a hen house, their second home, there on the Foxden Webb place. Its secure walls and fencing provided a barrier against the roaming, hungry dogs and foxes. No doubt Katy's hens enjoyed their security behind the closed door and fenced chicken yard. Perhaps they'd lay better, too. Perhaps her roosters would feel more like strutting and crowing early in the morning after a night of undisturbed roosting. Katy's second dream became a reality. She was seeing her hens settled on the Foxden Webb place. The cycle repeated itself, and the Lord received the praise. Yes, Katy had another dream for her family and home. There, on the Foxden Webb place, she hoped they'd be able to afford a new linoleum for the front room floor and a new bedstead for Kenneth Ray and Benny. In the Spiegel May Stern catalog, she'd seen pictures of linoleum patterns, pictures of all colors and flowers of green leaves. Yes, creating images of a pleasant, shiny floor covering. And in that same catalog, she'd seen a bedstead, one with a brown, rounded, metal headboard and footboard with bright yellow flowers, one linoleum and one bedstead. With planning, and 8 cents plus 16 cents plus 24 cents plus 32 cents plus 40 cents plus more cents, plus money from selling a hog, her dreams became a reality. A catalog order was mailed to Spiegel May Stern in Chicago, Illinois, and a linoleum and bedstead were delivered to Tunnel Hill, Illinois. The new-smelling linoleum was absolutely, well, there was just no way for Katy to describe it. The beauty she saw in it didn't compare, though, with how much Katy was thankful for it. It took it a few days to want to settle down and not curl up. All it needed was a bit of warming up, but soon it was lying flat in the middle of the big front room floor. Even Katy admitted that the small linoleum looked lost in that big room, but it was smooth and shiny and flowery, and it was a linoleum. And the boy's undented, polished bedstead was just what Katy'd hoped it'd be. To her, it seemed to be pretty solid, fairly heavy, and she figured it would hold up for many a year. Shortly, that new bedstead was all put together with brand new slats, and it boasted a new straw tick and an almost new feather bed. Its new bed sheets, all homemade, were made of 10 cents per yard unbleached muslin and sewn on Katie's Eldridge sewing machine. Again, she thanked the Lord for his blessings, and the Lord received the praise. Yes. Fortunately, spirits were lifted, even while the winter winds whistled through the airy log house on the Foxtan Webb place. The linoleum covered some of the floor and gave the children a place to play. The new bedstead brightened the corner, and she gave the boys a hope that they would have a firm bed on which to sleep. Now, if looking at and admiring the new linoleum would have caused it to age, that linoleum would have been worn out in a week's time. And even though the bedstead was made out of metal, that headboard and footboard would have been dented. The yellow flowers would have been worn off and gone, and the straw tick and feather bed would have been flat and sagging, if the looking and admiring would have caused aging. Yes, the first week of December on the Foxtan Webb place was brutally cold, but finally the weather moderated. Finally, December 20th came. Every soul and 4-footed and 2-footed animal breathed a sigh of relief, welcoming the respite. Now, beginning with Alan, this moderation meant that there'd be more wood remaining on the woodpile, fewer steps taken to carry in wood, less ice to be chopped on frozen ponds, a muddier hog lot, easier milking times, and fewer frozen eggs in Katie's henhouse. For the animals, there were more reasons for grazing and foraging. Tiny sprigs of green grass, tiny shoots of green shot up. The milk cows, hogs, chickens, mules, brood mares, the herd of cattle. Oh, they were all probably confused by the warm spell. The folks on the Foxtan Webb place were thankful for an easier time in existing during the winter season, giving the Lord the praise for all good things. For Katie, one of her chores, clothes washing, seemed easier. The large black wash kettle, with a blazing fire under it, could be used for most of the laundry, and she could work in the washing of a quilt or two. Her indoor clotheslines were less burden because she dried most of the clothes outside. During the moderation, the clothes weren't frozen completely stiff when she carried them back inside. Kenneth Ray was at the Webb School most of the time during the warm spell. He could really enjoy the recess time. With a stick, the boys would draw a reasonably big-sized circle on the grassless, dry soil on the Webb School playground, and in a game of marbles, Kenneth Ray'd add 2, maybe or more, to his own few. The boys played finders, keepers, losers, weepers, and in the case of a marble being knocked out of the circle, Kenneth Ray didn't get too cold in his search to find that marble in the short, beaten-down grass. If he was lucky, he'd find a forgotten, out in the weeds marble, and after admiring it, he dropped it into his tobacco sack, and that marble'd be in no danger of being lost again after he pulled and dried that yellow backer-sack string. The boy and girl games of kick the can, Rover Red Rover, jump the rope, tag, and Andy Over also took up a big part of the 30 minutes of recess time, often not allowing enough time for a trip to the outhouse, which was a good distance from the schoolhouse. Kenneth Ray tried to do what Miss Aline told him, and he tried to remember about the outhouse trip, but sometimes he'd forget all about having to go, and oh well, that'd be a reason to raise his hand unexpectedly. Now Benny, he missed being with Kenneth Ray during the day. He wasn't old enough to go to school, so he was at home with Mommy and Geraldine. Most of his days were preoccupied with dragging the 4 wagon drawers across the slick front room linoleum. This young lad played his own version of wagon train by tying the 4 drawers together, with Mommy's help, with some of Mommy's string. In time, the 4 knobs fell off and wouldn't stay on, but the drawers were still intact and looked like wagons, at least in Benny's imagination, and he saw wagons. Those wagons at one time were drawers which were a part of Katie's Eldridge Treadle sewing machine. Those valuable commodities, which actually belonged in those drawers, were in a box on a shelf. Yes, Katie knew about the 4 empty slots in her machine cabinet, and she never missed having the 4 drawers right there in the sewing machine cabinet. And she knew about the missing drawer knobs, and Alan would tease her and say, "You'd give these children a hammer and a looking glass to play with." And Katie'd say to herself, "I've got to do something with them if I want to get anything done around this place." Alan couldn't dispute that. Fortunately, the sewing machine sewed, with or without drawers and knobs on drawers. As a result of Katie's outlook on the important things, she enjoyed Kenneth Ray and Benny. Yes, wearing shirts with collars, buttons, and buttonholes, which she'd put together for them. Then for Geraldine she made patterns for dresses, and flannelette gowns, and underskirts, and threaded the machine and wound the long bobbin and commenced with more necessary sewing. Katie's scraps and pieces of cloth were saved, and blocks of cotton material, overall fabric, and flour sacks were cut to form patterns and sewn together for Katie's quilts. The Lord got the praise. Yes. As Katie treadled the machine, Benny and Geraldine while away the hours. An old pillow made a perfect cushion to put under their heads so they could stand on their heads against the front room wall. There they played hide and seek, and they'd crawl under the bed, and Benny'd return to the wagon game, and Geraldine would play with her homemade dolly. Now, while Katie was busy at the sewing machine and trying to sew a few stitches, she taught them to play a color-guessing riddle game. She'd tell them to look around the room, and after looking for something that she thought they could find easily, she said, "Riddle, riddle, Marie, I see something that you don't see, and it's blue, and it has long legs, and it has shiny gold on it." Now, after looking from corner to corner for something like that, guess after guess was made, and whoever'd be first to guess the correct answer to Mommy's riddle, in this case a pair of Alan's overalls hanging behind the heating stove, could guess the next riddle. Not knowing all of her colors, Geraldine whispered, "Mommy, help me." Katie stopped treadling. She looked at Benny. She winked at him. She passed clues to Geraldine. Now, knowing he'd lose, Benny threw himself down on the floor and hid his face, pretending to be a sore loser. Yes, Geraldine was the winner after guessing overalls, Daddy's overalls. She then was to think of a riddle. The treadling stopped again. Katie put her mouth close to Geraldine's ear. A good deal of whispering and questioning and asking went on. Geraldine tried to repeat Mommy's words. She'd say, "Riddle, riddle, Mommy, huh? Oh, riddle, riddle, Marie. I see, huh? I see something, that you don't see, and it's got, what did you say, Mommy? It's got lots of colors. It's got lots of colors. And what did you say, Mommy? Huh? Huh? What did you say, Mommy? Oh, it's got lots of flowers. Benny looked all around the room. First he ran over to the brown metal footboard of the bed he and Kenneth Ray slept in. He tapped on it a couple of times. Ting, ting, and guessed, it's this bed. Elated, Geraldine proudly announced, no, no. Unable to contain her excitement, she twirled around in the middle of the floor several times. While Benny was thinking, she stopped. She looked at him, hoping he'd not say the word she was thinking. Is it here in this room? She nodded her head, meaning yes. Benny's eyes went from this place to that place. He jumped up. Well, I know now, he yelled. It's the apron Mommy's got on. Geraldine shouted out, shaking her head from side to side. That wrong guess made her feel as if she had to go around in circles in the middle of the floor some more. The treadling of the sewing machine filled in the gaps of silence between the guesses. Benny was looking everywhere for something with flowers. Flowers! Mommy's foot was going up and down and up and down. Her machine's long shuttle was sliding back and forth. Chickle, 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 it went, and Geraldine had gone around in circles enough times to make her get swimmy-headed and fall down on the floor. I know, Benny yelled loudly, as if he had a competitor. It's that quilt up there. He pointed to the quilt, shouting at the top of his lungs. I know, it's Mommy's quilt. Yes. In the corner, hanging a couple of feet down from the ceiling, was the quilt, made up of remaining scraps of the flowered cotton flour sacks that Katy'd used in making one dress for herself and 2 dresses for Geraldine. Also blended in with the flowered pieces were a few scraps of material with blue and red checks. She'd been happy to find a blue checkered flour sack, one big enough to make a shirt for Benny, and then she'd found a red checkered sack, and she'd managed to make a red checkered shirt for Kenneth Ray. She scrimped on to making the sleeves on Kenneth Ray's shirt. She admitted those sleeves were a bit shorter than what she would have liked, but Katy'd done the best she could with what she had. And yes, her quilt top of flowers and checks covered the batting and the lining and was rolled up in the long wooden quilting frames, and it'd stay that way until she'd find the time to lower it and sit down close to it with a piece of chalk on a string. She'd draw what she called a fan, and then with her thimble on her stout finger and her threaded quilting needle in her right hand, she'd follow that faint white outline and push that needle down through the quilt top and the batting and the lining, and she'd make about 4 stitches and force the needle and the thread back to the quilt top, and her stitches would always be neat stitches. And when Katy'd find time to do some stitching on the quilt, she'd think about her mother and her grandmother, Prudy Catherine Grant Choate. They'd been the ones who'd taught Katy to piece and put together a quilt top, and that quilting would be on a different day when Katy'd have the time to quilt. With Geraldine sprawled out on the floor and breathing hard and seeing the ceiling and the hanging quilt spinning around and around, she was in no shape to say, now, Benny, you give me one. You give me a riddle. So Benny didn't give her a riddle, but he did take a big jump and landed flat-footed on the floor. That big jump put him closer to the wagon train that was on the other side of Mommy's sewing machine. The guessing game was officially over. Benny was more interested in his wagon train, and Geraldine was watching Mommy's foot go up and down and up and down. And Katie was getting quite a bit of sewing done, and she was thankful for that. And she thought about the quilt in the frames and was thankful for the almost 2 whole rows she'd been able to get done on that quilt. And she was thankful for the 2 children under her feet, together, at home with her, in one small corner of Christmas Tree Country. The Lord got the praise. Yes. Naturally, Katie thought of Kenneth Ray and wondered just what he was doing there with Miss Eileen and the neighbor children in the Webb school. At one time in her boy's life, Katie wondered if he'd even live. That was when he was barely 2 years old. He caught scarlet fever, a highly contagious and almost fatal disease. Oftentimes it was fatal. That's when we lived down on the Gene Kuntz place, she thought. For more than a week, Kenneth's fever had been high. No medicine was successful in treating scarlet fever. He might get well, the doctor said. Katie prayed and watched, helpless in her own power. She'd see him bore his head into his pillow. Every time Katie'd think about what he was going through, she wanted to cry. She realized, oh so well, how Kenneth Ray was suffering, because she, when she was 15 years old, had scarlet fever too. To add to that torment, Katie had another worry. She was fearing that Benny'd come down with scarlet fever. She talked to Lulie. Katie depended upon Lulie's motherly wisdom. Lulie's opinion was consoling. Being a mother of 10 children, she spoke from experience. Lulie assured Katie that Benny wouldn't get scarlet fever because he was still nursing, and Mommy agreed with Lulie too. Katie gave credence to the words of these 2 women. In time, Kenneth Ray's fever went away, and it didn't come back. The nervousness passed. Benny didn't get sick. Benny was 5 months old, not yet able to sit alone, and as usual, Katie was caring for the children, preparing the supper meal, hoping she'd be able to drive up and shut up the milk cows in the barn for Alan. Hurrying and doing the best she could, Katie made plans to leave the house, to run down to the barn for just long enough to do what she had to do. When she left her kitchen, Kenneth Ray was sitting in his high chair, eating peaches. Benny was on his pallet. Katie glanced back at them and ran quickly to do what she'd been thinking about all day long. When she returned and opened the door, there was another worrisome time. On Kenneth Ray's high chair, she found peaches mixed with blood. She realized Kenneth Ray had eaten the peaches and vomited. Kenneth Ray was terrified. He was crying. Katie was terrified. Alan was out in the fields, and she was alone. She cleaned up Kenneth Ray, but she didn't bother the peaches and the vomit. She wanted to let Alan see that. Milking time was coming on, and she knew he'd be coming in from the fields with the team. She hoped it'd be soon. She carried Kenneth, holding him, rocking him. She started praying. Shortly, Alan walked through the door. He seemed to think that the vomiting was a good thing, like medicine, maybe, for the scarlet fever. Again, Katie depended upon Alan and what he thought, and she relied upon the Lord's help too, and the Lord got the praise. Yes. The news traveled throughout Christmas Tree Country by word of mouth, from house to house. Eventually, Katie's younger sister, Mary, heard about Kenneth Ray and his vomiting up blood. Mary paid a visit to Katie. Mary then passed the word to Miss Lucille. Consequently, Miss Lucille stopped by to offer her help. Meaning well, she gave Kenneth Ray a peanut candy bar. He vomited soon after eating the candy. For some reason, blood oozed out of his ears. The news spread across the hills, and Christmas Tree Country folks The little fellow would have died if that blood would have gone down into his stomach. It was just the good Lord taking care of him. Yes, the Lord got the praise. That was only one scary time for Katy. She recalled another time. That particular memory involved both Kenneth Ray and Benny. On that cold winter day, Allen was milking the cows, and she needed to carry a clean bucket down to him. She left 3-year-old Kenneth Ray and 19-month-old Benny playing in the warm front room, while she, out of necessity, ran down to the barn. Even though the boys were out of her sight, they were never away from her in her thoughts. While Katy hurried as quickly as possible, they were playing with death. When she returned to the warm house, she could hardly believe her eyes. Kenneth Ray was standing on a kitchen chair, pretending to shave Benny's head. In Kenneth Ray's hand was Allen's sharp, straight razor, poised right above Benny's soft spot, the fontanelle. Kenneth Ray had the right idea, minus the shaving lather and whiskers, and he was practicing on a willing customer. Apparently Benny was too willing. His barber needed more experience. Katy's nerves were tested when she rushed in to see the sight. A small nick on the soft spot on Benny's head was the result of a boy's first attempt to be a man or a barber and shave like Daddy. Putting the memory aside, Katy returned to the task at hand. She was fixing a bite to eat there on the Foxtan Webb place. She thought, "Oh, Lord, that could have killed Benny. That nearly scared me to death. We had some narrow escapes down there on the Gene Coons place. Thank you, Lord, for watching over these 2 boys. Well, I guess I'd better peel a few potatoes. Allen's going to be in here pretty soon for his dinner." As Katy's pot of chicken and dumplings simmered, she peeled a few potatoes and wadded up a few biscuits. She was ready to add water to her white beans, and she found the water bucket was empty. During her fast run to the water barrel with the empty bucket, she remembered another scary time, a time when Kenneth Ray, almost 2 years old, got into a predicament. Quite naturally to Katy, he was the finest child in the world, especially there in Christmas Tree Country. Once again, Katy began reliving that day when Kenneth Ray fell down into the open cellar there. She could see him playing in the dirt with a spoon and a box with a string tied to it before it all happened. As Katy made trips to the cistern, she'd stop to talk to him. She was thankful she'd been able to pick 4 quarts of strawberries while he played. They were the first of the June berries. She kept an old chair by his dirt pile and sat down and capped them. Kenneth Ray stood close to her and ate the first one she capped, and then he returned to shoveling his dirt. Katy threw the strawberry caps out into the grass. She went back to work at her cook table, and all the while she kept an eye on Kenneth Ray as he sat and played in his dirt. Katy remembered having her rolling pin ready to roll out the dough for the crust. Suddenly, she heard Kenneth Ray's screams. In a flash, she was out the back door and following the sounds of his screaming. To the cellar she ran, and there he was. The little fellow had tumbled down into the cellar and was lying face down on the stone floor and squalling at the top of his lungs. Finally, they crawled out of the cellar together. Kenneth Ray was crying. His nose was running. Katy's heart was pounding. Carrying him, she moved quickly to the cistern and the water bucket. Several minutes passed. A mix of dirt and water and pie crust dough was deposited on the ground close to the cistern. Kenneth Ray was buck naked as she carried him inside. The water in the washpan and the smutches on the front of her apron served as proof of an unexpected happening in an often feared place. The job of cleaning up was finished when each of them donned a fresh change of clothes, and Katy was wearing a clean apron. Katy, knowing Allen and the men would be in for dinner, returned to the sticky dough, and when they did come in, Allen heard the news of Kenneth Ray's tumble. He said, "Well, Katy, he's playing and all. I'd say he's all right." But during the rest of that nerve-wracking day, Katy kept a close eye on Kenneth Ray, doing whatever she could to keep him from going to sleep. She thought, "Mommy says you oughtn't let a person go off to sleep after a hard lick on the head." Katy thought that Mommy knew best. Katy tried to do her best, and she kept Kenneth Ray awake. That gave her time to think about what happened and why, and a hint of impatience became obvious in Katy's demeanor. Her brown eyes sparkled. "Now," she said with determination, "Allen's going to find time to put a cover over that cellar. I don't know how, but he's going to find the time to do that." And the cellar was covered, and soon, too, with heavy boards, a heavy branch rock from the creek to hold the heavy boards in place. Katy smiled. She looked at the boys playing on the front room floor. She saw Geraldine moving around on the bed, and she knew that she'd be waking up soon. Katy felt content. "That time down in the cellar seems like a long time ago," she thought. "I don't know how I ever did get anything ready for Allen and all of those Shirbaum men to eat that day. I bet those biscuits were as hard as rocks. Oh, well." Lost in her thoughts, Katy didn't hear Allen on the back porch or feel the tugging on her dress. But when Geraldine called out, "Daddy, Mommy's got dumplings for dinner," her mind returned to the kitchen on the Fox Den Webb place. So Katy turned her attention to setting the eating table for Allen, Benny, and Geraldine, and she missed seeing Kenneth Ray sitting on the eating bench. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Yes, Katy thought the minutes that day with Kenneth Ray down in that cellar were terrorizing. In her wildest dreams, she couldn't have imagined more frightful incidents for this child, nor could she see herself being the mother of 5 more children. Did she naively think that Kenneth Ray's tumble into the cellar would be the last of her frights in his life? Did she believe or hope that he'd be spared of any cuts, bruises, and heartaches throughout all of his natural life? Did she? Well, yes, she did. Never in Katy's mission as a mother did she think she'd endure the agony of seeing a second son with a pitchfork stuck in his head, a daughter lying unconscious for hours after being thrown from a horse, a daughter with a smashed and broken finger after a car door was slammed shut, a daughter being severely burned with hot coffee, and a son being pushed out of a culvert to fall into a hole and land against a big rock and suffer a broken arm. And did Katy ever dream that this precious child, Kenneth Ray, would become a soldier in the United States Army and leave home and travel overseas and experience many, many more tumbles on the road of life? No, that was a long, long way from Christmas tree country and her rocking chair. What Katy did know, however, was that she could and should rely upon prayer for each day's walk. This young mother in Christmas tree country was a woman of faith, and she came close to God, and she felt his close companionship with her. He gave her the words of his Son, Jesus, in Matthew chapter 6, verse 34. "Take therefore no thought for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. After Allen carried in wood for the stove for the night, darkness had settled in, and his thoughts turned to the next day. "Katy, hon, this is really warm weather for this time of the year," he said. "It's already the 20th of December." "Yes, and Allen, did you remember that the day after tomorrow is your birthday, the 22nd of December?" 32 years old, he said, seeming surprised. "Well, Katy, hon, I've told Poppy I'd try to get down there. I think maybe tomorrow it ought to be a good day and the boys can go too. I'd say Geraldine's going to be better in the morning. If she's not, I'll wait a few days. Mommy and Poppy could really use the fresh meat. Well, we'll just see." A short time passed. Katy was putting away the last of the supper dishes. Allen sat down by the kitchen cook stove, holding Geraldine on his lap. He said again, 32 years old. "Well, if I do go, you oughtn't have any trouble keeping the place warm for no longer than I'll be gone. But sometimes this kind of warm weather just brings on a good snow." "Yes, I've seen that too." "Well, Allen, we'll just take what the good Lord gives us, and we'll take it one day at a time. We don't have any control over a lot of things, and for sure we don't have control over the weather. I'm just hoping that you won't have any trouble with Kenneth Ray and Benny." "Aw, shucks, Katy." Tick-tock, tick-tock. Unbeknownst to the slumbering family of 5, the hours, the minutes of the nights were passing swiftly and peacefully. The good Lord in heaven was blessing the weary folks with slumber, compelling each one to take leave of the cares and concerns of the day. They placed their lives in the hands of God, the only one capable of seeing them through the night. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Only the faithful timepiece was making an effort to keep up with the passing minutes. No one in Allen's home heard the clock strike 11 times. The timepiece was dependable because it was maintained and kept in good working order. Allen, at least twice a year, took the clock from its shelf, set it on the eating table, and oiled the parts. He'd find a long, clean feather, dip it into coal oil, and brush it across the clock's spring several times. Occasionally, the pendulum needed to be adjusted, but without fail the clock was carefully wound once a week. Katy kept the clock high on a shelf and away from the hands of the children. The glass cover over the clock's face was always closed, and its case was dusted often. With her efforts, along with Allen's, the clock ran smoothly for weeks and weeks. If they needed an expert's hands and experience, Katy's Poppy, Mr. Brooks, as Allen called him, was the one who could adjust the pendulum to keep it from running too fast or too slow. Mr. Brooks had the patience and the desire to correct a clock in poor running condition. For a clock's timing to be without flaw, he manipulated each small part, and he wasn't satisfied until the timing was perfect and predictable. He valued orderliness. He was known for his desire to see each thing in proper order and free from confusion, down to the planting of the trees in his apple orchards. Poppy wanted to see straight rows. Methodical order was also true for the organization of the tools in his big wooden toolbox and his personal items in his neat secretary desk. This attitude was reflected in his interactions with his children. Poppy desired to see his family kept in order. No one came to the kitchen table without first washing hands in the washpan. No loud talking or misbehaving was allowed in the kitchen. Each mealtime began with the whole family sitting down quietly at the eating table while he gave the prayer of thanks. Furthermore, this Christmas tree country father taught his children to respect the physical home in which they were raised. None of the children in the Brooks family carelessly tracked mud into the house. The homemade furniture, beds, accommodations, and living spaces reflected order and cleanliness. Personal hygiene, made possible with the washpan, a No. 2 galvanized wash tub, Mommy's homemade lye soap, baking soda for the teeth. They all reinforced Poppy's appreciation for decent physical living. Each one living under the Brooks roof pitched in by rising early, cleaning up, combing hair, brushing off any loose hairs, and making beds. Perhaps this meticulous, strict husband and father could see the similarity between his expectations for his family and the maintenance of his clocks. Worth repeating is the fact that Poppy lived the life of an honest, disciplined man, keeping himself in line and assuming the role of leader in his family. Yes, added to his 6 children by Neva was Olin Esco by Katie's mother, Rosie May, in her marriage to Oscar Reynolds. Poppy assumed the responsibility and believed in living by the guidelines of God's Word. The Bible had shown him that the Master Creator instituted the family, put the man and woman together, created offspring, and delegated to the man the responsibility of taking care of his family. Katie, having a close relationship with Poppy, understood the manner in which he lived his life. She was influenced by his deep convictions. She, being much like him, preferred discipline, and she became a Christian at the age of 15. Her grounded faith in the Lord Jesus Christ and her love for the Bible truth compelled her to seek wisdom daily as she emulated Poppy. After marrying Alan, she faithfully braved her obligations, praying for Alan and supporting him, praying for her children and guiding them, and allowing Alan to be the head of the household. And she gave the Lord the ultimate place of authority over her and all of them. Katie, first the daughter of Bay and Rosie May Brooks, then the wife of Alan, and then the mother to 3 children. Yes, Katie committed her life to keeping things in good working order, like her Poppy. This Johnson County man had no way of knowing what a powerful, godly influence he could claim over this oldest child born to him and Rosie May Choate Reynolds Brooks. Behind every good man is a good woman, is how the old saying was worded. That was true of the woman behind Bay. Domestically, Rosie May was the head of the Brooks home. She devoted her day's hours to nurturing, cleaning, and cooking. Even as a small child, Katie thought there was no other woman in all of the small world she knew who was like her mommy. No other woman could cook like Mommy. No other woman was as clean with her cooking as Mommy. Although Rosie May knew what the Bible said about vanity, the amount of care that she gave to the appearance of her kitchen table would have challenged her seriousness in heeding the warnings in Solomon's Truths. She found pleasure in the beauty of her eating table. The shiny blue willow plates, cups, and saucers laid out on her favorite white oilcloth made a striking appearance. Usually in the middle of the table, Rosie set her large, round, white sugar bowl with a lid on it to keep the sugar clean. The family's rectangular eating table was always covered with an oilcloth with its own clean smell, and was wiped after each meal and before each meal. The oilcloths varied in colors and designs and were replaced when the sharp corners of the table protruded through and caused the heavy cloth to tear. Rosie May's kitchen, brightened by 2 windows, one on the north and another on the west, served as a happy memory and an inspiration for Katie. An inside door on the east opened into the front room. A door on the south opened onto a back porch. Yes, Katie remembered the moments she'd spent in that kitchen with Mommy and the family. From generation to generation, Katie thought, from Grandma Prudy Catherine Grant Choate to my Mommy, to me, to my children, good ways can be passed down. The Bible says, whatsoever is true, whatsoever is noble, whatsoever is right, whatsoever is pure, whatsoever is lovely, whatsoever is admirable, think about such things, and I want to think on those things. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. The clock struck 12 times. It was midnight. If that clock could have talked, it would have said, Katie, 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 today is Saturday. This is December 21st, 1935. Katie, in a deep, deep sleep, dreamed. She was dreaming about being with Poppy. Often she was with him in her childhood home, the Brooks place, west of the tunnel, in the house that Poppy'd built. Yes, she'd spend a lot of time with Poppy. That house felt like home to Katie. That was the only home Katie'd known before becoming Alan's wife. She stirred in her sleep. She sometimes dreamed about Mommy, too, but Katie was especially close to Poppy. She'd spent many hours with him and followed him behind a plow, helped him with the chores at the barn, worked with him in the apple orchard, and she'd been right there with him while he was making pieces of furniture. During their times together, she and Poppy would talk, real talk. He'd listen to her and provide his wisdom and sense of humor. Possibly he realized that Katie needed to hear what he knew for the many years ahead of her in her life. Tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. The clock struck, attempting to tell someone, anyone, that it was 1 o'clock. In vain the clock performed its job. Geraldine coughed. Silence followed. Geraldine coughed again. No one in the room heard the coughing or the striking of the clock except Katie. The noisy barking of the coyotes deep down in the woods and the loud shrill squeaks of the mouse helplessly caught in the trap under the Hoosier cabinet went unnoticed by everyone in the room except Katie. Often she slept with one eye open, instinctively listening for the sounds of her children. She'd hear the night sounds, and by choice, Katie slept less soundly than the other 4 who shared this big room with her. On duty 24 hours a day, Katie noticed the slight coughs as well as the deeper ones. At this particular time, Her baby needed her during this bout of coughing. Katy remembered the scripture that said Jesus' words, which were, "Lo, I am with you always." And as she lay there, waiting for more coughing, she said softly, "And Geraldine, I'm right here with you too, hun." Katy's heart was warmed with the confirmation that the Lord had made this promise to little Geraldine and all of her children, his children. "Lo, I am with you always," were words of comfort. Lo, I am with you always. Minutes passed. Geraldine stirred. Katy was wide awake. Geraldine coughed and sat up in bed. The chill of the cold air caused her to shiver, lie down again, and move closer to her mother. Quickly the covers were placed over the small chest, and Geraldine lay quietly. "I'll get a drink of water for you, hon." But before Katy sat up, she patted Geraldine and whispered, "And you just stay there by your daddy and keep warm." Easily, but with haste, Katy's bare feet touched the cold wood floor. The room was pitch black. She blinked hard, trying to see the stand table near her bed, the table on which she'd set a small cup of water for Geraldine, just in case the coughing did begin again in the middle of the night. "I think I see that cup," Katy thought. When her fingers touched the table, she thought of Poppy. He'd built that stand table for them, using yellow pine boards. The table was 28½ inches tall, with a middle shelf and a top, each measuring 21 by 24 inches. Deftly she moved her fingers across the tabletop. She felt the boards and the cracks between the boards. Katy was certain she'd find that cup, and finally she touched the cold, moist tin cup. "Sit up now, hun, and take a drink of this good water, and it'll help that cough," she said, raising Geraldine to a sitting position. Geraldine whimpered. "Shh, it'll be better, hun," she said soothingly, trying to balance Geraldine and the cup of water. Small, warm fingers touched Katy's hand. "Now, hun, it's a cup of water, and it'll be cold. Let's be careful we don't want to spill it," Katy whispered, knowing that Geraldine was not fully awake. Somehow, even in the total darkness of the room, the sleepy child pulled the cup of water to her lips without spilling one drop. She gulped noisily and swallowed hard, pausing only long enough to catch her breath between swallows. "Mommy," she said, and lay down. "Do you want me to put more water in the cup, hun?" No longer thirsty and no longer coughing, her reply was, Mommy," and she was asleep again. Katy wasted in no time in pulling the covers close to the child's shoulders, and she too lay down. She placed her hand on Geraldine's forehead, checking for any signs of fever. Softly she said, "Your daddy was right. You are going to be better in the morning, hun. This bed really does feel good. Whew. Well, anyway, it won't be too long until it'll be time to get up. We'll have to get this place all warmed up again." Suddenly, Katy missed the Gene Kuntz place. She felt small lying there in that big room with its high ceiling, but she said to herself, "I am at home, and Alan and the children are here. This is home for me, for us. Now, it's home until the Lord calls us to our real home with Him. We're just passing through." Since everyone was asleep, and it wasn't yet time to get up, Katy closed her eyes. No one was calling her name. She went back to sleep. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Thoughts of the Gene Kuntz place passed through her subconscious. That small, warm house, a comfortable home, water in a good cistern. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Katy yawned, fell asleep, and dreamlike images formed in her mind.